Yo, what's good, people? Izzy Matt here, back once again with another season of the MDL. Doing something a little bit different this time. We're doing kind of an off-season event, though it is a full-length season, regular playoff structure, blah blah blah, all of that. Uh, Maxwell is taking this season off. I'm running most of it myself, but today we also have our other two regular MDL hosts here, Dan and Ryan. Go ahead and say hello, guys.
Hello, guys.
Back with Izzy Matt as always, ready for another great PRs. I know we don't have a methodology slide for this one. I know that most of everybody listening to this has done PRs and is familiar with the format, but for those unfamiliar, we assume we don't take coach history into account for these. We assume if we handed these to equally skilled coaches, that this is sort of how things would play out if you just gave them to a bunch of equally skilled coaches over the course of a season. We do our best to not bias ourselves with play style and that sort of thing when we do these rankings. And as a side note, these are the average rankings between the three of us. So this is the average rank between Matt, Dan, and I. We all had separate PRs that we then compiled into one list. So we do have some disagreements on some coaches. We also have some stuff where we're pretty much on the same page. So
Yeah, and we'll talk about those as we hit them. Uh, and just as a reminder to everybody not in this league, anyone else who might be watching, the format is a little bit different from the usual Series 9 format that you see in a lot of leagues. We're using pretty much the same format as MDL Season 4. This is the Matt's Doubles League, by the way, just to be clear, since Maxwell's not here this season. Same format as Season 4. We have a limited number of mythicals and restricteds on our tier list, and transfer moves are allowed as well. So that has some pretty serious consequences when it comes to extra tailwind users, extra follow me users, stuff like that.
uh, oh, and by the way, PRs aren't predictive. A low ranking on
Yes.
PR does not indicate your season or anything. This is a fun thought exercise. Dan has memes he will share if you get on us about that. Let's go.
All right. So, Dan, anything else to add before we move into our first coach?
Nope, I've already hit the slide on my end, so
Oh,
ready
okay.
to move into Tiny Gambit King in
Okay.
the
So
number
yes,
14 spot.
yes, number 14, we have TinyGambitKing rocking the Metagross here with the G-Max Urshifu Rapid Strike, Mudsdale, Grimmsnarl, Mimikyu, Kanto, Moltres, Silvally, Sock, Galvantula, Squirtle, and Exploud. So yes, usually this this slide is usually reserved for one of our MDL regulars, Burst. He is not here this time. Who knows where he will land? But um, he had a little bit better of a team this time than a 14th ranked team. So this team, I think, it's got some powerful stuff. It's got some the most marked thing I like about this team is the type synergy around the Metagross. I'm always a huge proponent of using Metagross in a Psychic Dark Fighting Core. I think this team does that pretty well. I really, really like Grimmsnarl with Metagross, and then you have two fighting types in the Urshifu and the Sock. I like Sock for inner focus stuff, especially with coaching. It's a little bit faster than Metagross. It's good for that. The Urshifu also helps out a little bit with the Metagross's fire weakness at the same time, while it's also a fighting type. So I think that's pretty solid there. Um, the team is pretty overwhelmingly physical. I know this is something that Gambit was pretty aware of during the draft, but I personally I don't really think he did a good enough job of achieving a balanced physical special split, even though the team is pretty intimidate. You've got, clear body, inner focus, Urshifu crit stuff, whatever. You've got some intimidate proof stuff, so that is nice. But there's also still you can kind of spam, like, I don't know, steel spike or coaching or reflect or whatever against this team fairly easily because it is, I think, also kind of sometimes maybe a little bit easy to counter these special attackers like Moltres. You just throw a rock at it. Galvantula and Silvally, I think, can be kind of underwhelming. So, um, super physical heavy team might be a little bit of a problem. Um, I think the biggest issue with this team, though, is actually the speed tiers and the maybe lack of speed control. The best thing you have probably is like Thunderwave and Scary Face from Grimmsnarl. Probably going to be relying on that a lot. Would love to see a fast Tailwind user here. Tornadus Incarnate is actually still on the board, which I don't want to I don't want to just dog on any Metagross team that doesn't have Tornadus on it. Um, but I think that if you're going to go with Metagross without Tornadus, if it was available, you kind of need to have a good reason and a good comp in mind that doesn't include Tornadus. I don't really think this is it. I think Tornadus really should be in that Urshifu slot. Maybe you put an offensive water type somewhere else on the team. That would be fine. But yeah, so speed control is a little bit of a problem. Moltres being your main trick or Tailwind setter is a little bit weird. It's not that fast. And
Main
Galvantula
tailwind setter is
being
still Valley. I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
oh yes, that's yes.
That is
Yeah,
100% the main tailwind, because Savali does get transfer tailwind, which I did consider
that is.
for
I think you're right.
my
That is
stuff.
probably the main Tailwind user because Moltres does like to max a lot, and the max airstreams will help with the speed control too. But Silvali's still not all that fast. I would like to see a fast or Prankster Tailwind. Um, and then Galvantula being the fastest thing on the team is, I think, a little bit rough. It's not even up to base 110. I think you're going to be relying a lot on like Scarfs and Grimmsnarl speed control. Probably Tailwind from Silvally, maybe Moltres, but speed I think is probably the biggest issue this team has. And then the last note, I think this is less important, but Mudsdale seems a little bit strange here. I think this team does need some kind of powerful Pokemon with a low speed stat, but I think it overlaps with Metagross in what it wants to do a little bit, despite the difference in typing. They're both big physical attackers. They like to max. They appreciate something like a weakness policy maybe. Um, but and I also think that Mudsdale typically likes to have a Trick Room setter that can support it a little bit better than Mimikyu does. Something at least that gets Helping Hand, maybe, or maybe something that's slower than Mudsdale that can like proc a weakness policy or hit it with a Swagger when you have Own Tempo or something like that. I do, Ground type and Trick Room Sweeper on this team makes sense. Mudsdale I think could be something better, and maybe you pick a different Trick Room Sweeper down in one of the lower tiers, maybe. That would be my preference. So I'll throw this over to Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of the stuff I was going to say. I think Will-O-Wisp is kind of an issue for this team on the whole.
Yeah,
Opposing Will-O-Wisp is bad. I also, generally speaking, with Metagross comps, I really don't like it when Foul Play is very free, and Foul Play looks kind of free here into a lot of Pokemon. There are some good resists, but like even just the ability to like chip stuff down with relatively high attack stats with Foul Play is never fun. Um, I also don't really love the main supports for Metagross that aren't Sock, in my opinion, or really that Mimikyu Grimmsnarl. Um, and I really don't love those both having a Steel Spike weakness when you have a Metagross. Something like, Tier 1 Torn and then Tier 2 Araquanid would make me like the team a lot better, for example. And then you can kind of support that in other ways. But yeah, the main issue is just it's too physical, and the speed tiers are kind of awkward to work with. I do like, however, I do like a lot of the support options on this team. I just don't think that the offensive options really have that support they need. I mean, come on, like Grimmsnarl, Mimikyu, Sock, Silvally, even like having those kind of mons in a more supportive role on a team is really good, really consistent, really proven. It's just that they aren't paired with the things that you would typically want them to be paired with. I do think Squirtle is pretty solid Tier 5 redirection, though. It's did pretty well last time it was used. And the Tier 6 Exploud, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't really fix the special issue. Exploud special attack still isn't awesome,
yeah.
and it's And kind of the best thing it gets is the cool Mimi Boomber stuff. And unless I missed something, there's no telepathy mon here. So, I mean, I guess he can run it not scrappy, but and do it with Mimikyu or whatever. But it's like, eh. So, kind of my thoughts. I feel like with a couple of transactions though, this team actually does jump quite a bit.
Oh
Because I
yeah,
do think
absolutely.
the supports are there. Like the support mons are there. A lot of the cores are here. It's just that like it's just that cohesively it doesn't all come together into a part where I'm like, yeah, I'm not just gonna will-o-wisp this team down. That's kind of my big concern. And with the lack of speed control, that's kind of especially exasperated. The Savali obviously does help, and Mimikyu is the best Trick Room setter in the game. Don't at me at that. But that's kind of all you really got going on. And those two things, Mimikyu doesn't like to be in TR itself, and it would be nice if Silvally wasn't kind of exclusively like Tailwind multi-attack parting shot bot. It'd be good if it was able to do more things. Any notes, Dan?
Yeah, I can sum this one up pretty quickly. The speed tiers aren't great, and the speed control is pretty middling as well. This has the skeleton of a great team offensively and defensively, but it's going to be going second most of the season, and that's never a great recipe. But I think that basically wraps up my thoughts on this team that you guys didn't really cover already.
All right, then we can move on to number 13. That is Hector. We'll throw this one over to Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hector's team's got the Dragapult, the Gmax Cinderace, the Latios, the Gmax Duraludon, Railu, Suicune, Aselgor, Heliolisk, Beheeyem, Vileplume, and Timber. Okay, so there's a lot of things that immediately pop when you look at this team. First of all, this team is fast, and it's going to be going first a lot of the time with the fast mode. It's going to hit hard. Max Dragapult hits hard, Max Cinderace hits hard, Max Latios hits hard, Max Duraludon. uh, Railu is great support with the follow me. It can also coaching some things up. Suicune can help set Tailwind. It can also be a bulky Snarl bot. Life Orb Suicune got some decent work in the PDPL recently, so that's an option as well. He's got backdoor Sun mode with the Vileplume and Heliolisk and the Railu, so there's a lot to like about this team. But looking at this team deeper, you see that there are three dragon types in his first four Pokemon that share, I think, five weaknesses overall between them are shared by at least two of them. And then if you look at the Dragapult, Cinderace, and Latios, they all want to max. Like Cinderace in this format almost needs to max because it is substantially better in max than out of max. Latios usually wants to max, even though it can have some support options and can function out of max. It's not nearly as good. And Dragapult's probably the best of these options working out of max, but it's also probably the best one in max as well. So there's just a lot of max pressure on this team. And then Trick Room exists in this format. There are a lot of teams that have Trick Room. And the answer on this team is we're going to try and bulk it out with Suicune, and we've got, I don't know, the Beheeyem as well. And this team is just incredibly soft to Trick Room, which I think is the biggest potential weakness of this team. So it's the defensively, it's easy to prep into with not as much coverage needed to hit so much of this team. If it's going second, the top end is actually fairly frail. Trick Room is weak, and there's a lot of max pressure. So the way I look at this team, I think that it is going to be great when it's going first. I say that about a lot of Dragon Ball teams. They're just going to start killing things, and there's not going to be a lot that can stand up to it. But the second someone gets speed control against this team, it really starts to crumble. But Matt, what do you think about Hector's team?
Yeah, I think that one of the one of the first things that stood out to me was the plethora of dragon types. Um, and you do have a steel type in Duraludon. I don't think there's a fairy here, so kind of an incomplete core here. But I think Duraludon's fine to pair with a lot of dragon types because steel takes care of all of the dragon weaknesses. But the Latios and the Dragapult are pretty rough together. And like you said, they share five weaknesses between those two Pokemon, just because Psychic and Ghost tend to share some weaknesses as well. So that's a little bit rough. I definitely like the Dragapult here. If I was going to get rid of one of these, it would definitely be the Latios. Riolu Dragapult, especially with Follow Me on Riolu, is absolutely insane. Um, and then like I said, the Fairy Dragon Steel Core incomplete without a Fairy type. I also kind of think that the Firewater Grass Core is incomplete, even though all of those boxes are checked. Suicune and Cinderace can kind of hang out together sometimes, but the Vileplume feels very strange because the Cinderace can't set Sun because he has the Gmax form here. Um, and speaking of Sun, I think the Sun and Trick Room modes, to the degree that those are here, are a little bit incomplete as well. The Trick Room mode is pretty much just Behem. Like, I don't really know why you draft Behem without some substantial amount of Trick Room stuff to go with it. Behem can't really hack it on its own. And then the Sun mode, like, you got Heliolisk, you got Vileplume, and those can be strong, but the only way you're really able to set Sun is with Riolu, and I'm not really a fan of that. If you had some stronger Pokemon like Charizard or Venusaur or something, then like maybe. But I don't think that spending your Riolu on Prankster Sunny Day when all you're getting out of it is Heliolisk or Vileplume is really worth it when Riolu could be doing other really powerful things. So I'm not really convinced that there's a great Sun mode here either. But at the same time, like with all that being said, Riolu Dragapult we saw from Anthony last season is like one of the hardest things to beat, and if you can't beat it, you might just get run over by it, and it's hard to ignore that even with a bunch of other problems on the team. So, Ryan.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting that I don't think either of you have commented on that I was thinking about, especially with Dragapult Latios, as someone who's used both of those mons reasonably extensively. One thing I actually kind of find interesting about the two is that they're dragon types with pretty deep move pool, so they're also both able to support a team pretty well. Latios has a fantastic support move pool and really good coverage, and Dragapult, I mean, we've all seen, Screens Pult with T Wave and Will-O-Wisp and Hex and all that stuff, right? So, like, I do think it's interesting because I do feel like both dragons could do different things, especially those two dragons. Like, I could see some really interesting synergistic stuff go on there potentially. The team does have a fair bit of I agree that I actually would like the Sun mode a lot better if this was regular Cinderace, which is a weird sentence, but it's true. Just because I actually really like the idea of Vileplume Heliolisk, but I think it's really hard for there to be a consistent, max flare like Pokemon too that could just click the button for it and let it go in. Even though some of these mons do get fire coverage. So Timber's really based. I think that's one of my favorite tier 6 picks, and that's really all my thoughts. And side note, we put the champion last season here, so yeah. Shows you how we do those.
Yeah, I believe he might have been second to last in the beginning power rankings last season as well, and then he
He
won.
was.
So yeah, it's just just a little more
Watch out.
right, just just a little more support for the idea that these are absolutely not predictive.
Mhm.
All right, moving on to number 12. We have CrabbySnail, otherwise known as Nick. So I really like this team. I like this team more than you guys do. We've got the Jirachi, Whimsicott, Entei, Terrakion, Kanto, Mr. Mime. Love that pick. Gmax, Inteleon, Zoroark, Zygarde, 10%, Spiritomb, Cinccino, and Cherim. So the first thing I think when I look at this team is just big fucking threat level. There's a lot here that's going to go fast and hit hard, and it's gonna be really hard to protect yourself against all of his different offensive options. Which a lot of which are enabled by various forms of support here, especially the Whimsicott. The Prankster Tailwind with fake tears, especially, I think is going to be pretty devastating. That's going to really unlock Jirachi quite a bit. Because as we know, some of these mythicals with base 100s across the board. As Dynamax options, they have really great natural bulk, but they can be a little bit underwhelming on the damage side. So they need some support there, and I think Whimsicott is going to be able to provide that pretty damn well for a Jirachi and for really, I mean, any special attacker here like Inteleon, Zoroark. You have the beat up mode with Whimsicott Terrakion, which is definitely threatening, but also a little bit more difficult to use in this format where there are follow me users kind of everywhere. Um, so I think it's a good thing to threaten in team preview. I think it's a good option to have. I don't think you should just table it every week just because your opponent has redirection, but uh, uh, it's a good mode to have, especially if you have some kind of contingency plan in case your opponent leads follow me. Um, Also, Whimsicott having taunt is great there as well. And I can also see Terrakion with coaching being really nice next to like a Max Entei or something. So there's a lot of threats here that I absolutely love. Overall, great type cores. There are a couple of problems, but they're pretty minor. The Fairy Dragon Steel core is made up of uh, Jirachi with Whimsicott slash Mr. Mime, and then Zygarde. Zygarde's not exactly the best dragon type, but I think dragon tends to be the least important part of that core. Um, Entei, Inteleon, Whimsicott is pretty strong. I would like to see maybe a little bit more offense on the grass type there, but you can only ask for so much. It's Whimsicott does all kinds of other good stuff. And then I actually really really like the Terrakion, Jirachi, and Zoroark. I've been using Zoroark a little bit in the PDCL, and it's been fun. Kind of impressive, more so than I thought it would be. So that core I really like. So you've got all the boxes checked, and I think they work together decently well. Um, so all of that stuff really great. I like all of that stuff on this team. Um, the the lower tier slots, I think you could have used a little bit better. Mostly referring to that Spirit Tomb and the Cherim slots. I think Cinccino is fine. It's decent. Decent tier 5. Like I said, I like the Zoroark. Kind of like the Zygarde too. I like the addition of the ground typing. It's good for the tier, even though it can be kind of underwhelming offensively, but adds to your speed tier, so that's nice. But I'm not really seeing the Spirit Tomb doing much. If it got Trick Room, it would be great, but it would also probably be in a higher tier. And then the Cherub, yeah, I guess you can set Sunny Day with Whimsicott or Max Flare with Entei, but I don't know. I'm not sure how much it's gonna be doing here. And then I think the biggest weakness here is just that there's such a stark Trick Room weakness. There is almost nothing on this team that's slow, which is kind of a strength because if you have a choice between going all fast or all slow, fast is probably better. But like, man, it leaves a really big hole for opposing Trick Room modes to come in and just underspeed and sweep really easily. So you're gonna have to either make some trades or really really focus on making sure Trick Room does not go up because this team is gonna get swept if a good powerful Trick Room sweeper gets into position. That's gonna be a big problem. And Max Quake is a little bit of a concern because there's a lot of ground weaknesses here and decent physical special splits. So maybe the special defense boosts are not always going to be super consequential. But yeah, I mean you got Jirachi, Entei, Terrakion, um, and then yeah, a lot of your offense is special. So it could be a slight concern. But yeah, that's all I got. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I there's a couple things I disagree with you on. First of all, I think Spiritomb is actually crucial to this team as the only thing that can fight Trick Room effectively.
I don't
Agreed.
think it
Yeah.
would be very effective.
Oh no, I did that shit all
No,
throughout
it's
TLDL. Spirit Team's so cracked. That
so
mon's so good for the tier. It's actually kind of my favorite low tier pick on this team.
I hope he
yeah.
proves me wrong.
But besides that, it is very, very Trick Room weak. But I do think you also understated the Max Quake concerns on this team because every physical Pokemon on this team is weak to ground. So either you're weak to ground
Oh
or
yeah.
you don't want to fight into a special defense boost. So I think that defensively is potentially the biggest issue on the team. But again, this is a trend with some of these early teams. They're just really soft to Trick Room, and you'll see why this is an issue when we start moving into some of the higher rated teams. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I like the Spirit Team pick, as I said. I think it was a really good pick. Yeah, my big issue with this team, for me at least, was kind of the Quake weakness. I do think there's some other fun techs on here. Like, I actually really like Whimsicott Entei quite a bit too, just because you get Eruption Entei because of transfer moves. So, you can like fake
Yes.
mirrors with that and stuff like that. That's really fun. I love the Mime pick. I think it's really good. But my main issue is that the problem I'm having is that Max Quake is so free, and I don't feel like all the low tiers are super stupendous. I don't Ferrum for tier 6, okay, fine, whatever. Chinchino, I feel like could instead be used for a slower Pokemon or like a low tier TR setter, something like that. I've used Zygarde 10%. Man, that mon's bad. I would love to see myself proved wrong on that, but I also don't think that Zygarde is doing anything that a lot of your other Pokemon don't already do better than it, both on a support and offensive end. Um, so yeah, I just think there's some roles missing on this team, and I would like the Max Quake weakness to kind of be a little less um, kind of in my face. But I actually do really like this team, and the more I looked at it, the more I did like it, which is always a good sign. So I do think Krabby, you got a strong team here. I think a couple tiny things, especially with how much trick room there is, would really benefit you. Spirit team's based though, don't drop it.
All right then. Moving on to number 11, we've got Goomy, and this one's gonna go to Dan.
Yeah, so this team has the Kyurem, Tapu Koko, Amoonguss, Gigalith, Togetic, Talonflame, Thievul, Uxie, Persian K, Steelix, and Mienfoo. Okay, so Matt, I know you like this team a lot less than I do, so I'll talk about why this team is probably rated low in this spot. First of all, Kyurem is an offensive beast in the format, and he is not in a division where every single person has a tier 1 steel type. So I think even though I was able to pop off a bit with it last season, it's going to have a lot more opportunity to show out this season. Second, Tabu Koko Thievul is a proven commodity that is always going to be very solid together. Now, there is some redundancy when you look at the Amoonguss and the Togetic. I think the Togetic will stay. I imagine the Amoonguss will be going uh, fairly soon, but Uxie is a very, very solid Trick Room setter. Then you have the Gigalith Steelix for actually a Sand TR mode, which is pretty powerful when you look at a lot of the ways that this team can attack you in TR. But I just think that the lead mode with the Kyurem and the Tapu Koko, supported with Togetic and to a lesser extent the Thievul as well, is really just going to make this team very, very powerful. Like there's just a solid amount of damage that this thing can output with good speed control as well, or redirection, and it can be functional both in and out of Trick Room. So this team checks a lot of boxes, even though this we did have a coach switch for this team, and Goomy is in the process of remaking the roster to some extent. So it is mid transition, but I think even now that it is a very very solid roster with a lot of options going into each week. But Matt, why don't you tell me why I'm wrong and you hate Goomy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I felt pretty strongly about ranking this team, or rather ranking Nick above this team. Um, and I think I mean, it's more that I was impressed by the synergy and threat level of Nick's team, and less about shitting on this one. Um, it's it's hard to be too hard on this team because obviously Goomy is replacing another player who dropped. Goomy did not draft this team. It's kind of a work in progress. He just picked up the Gigalith when he had a free transaction coming in as the replacement coach, which is why I'm expecting a Sandrush user during his next transaction. Maybe a Mungus for Dracovish. That might be kind of cool. Um, but yeah, it just feels kind of it just feels a little bit haphazardly put together and incomplete because it is incomplete, and that's not Gumi's fault. But it doesn't really. To me, it's kind of obvious that this is a transitional kind of team, and it's not really where it's supposed to be yet. Um, the there's some strange pieces that might not really fit here, like the Amoongus. Yeah, that's a little bit redundant with the Togetic. Um, the Uxie, I don't really. I mean, yeah, you need a Trick Room setter, but I don't know how much I like that one here. Um, Talonflame seems okay, but you already have so much speed, at least with the Coco Thievel, that I'm not sure how important that is. And a lot of the offense just seems really concentrated in those top two mons and kind of the Gigalith. I think getting whatever Sandrush user he's planning on picking up, I think is going to fix that a lot. Um, I just see some incomplete stuff here that I'm expecting to be fixed in the future. So um, that's that's how I feel about this team. Ryan?
It's got some stuff. I do think the that focusing offense at the top, especially when your top mons are as versatile as Kiram and Coco, where there can either be special or physical, isn't as bad a thing. The fact that it's two mons that can run that physical or that special set, I think is okay. I actually kind of like the double redirection, even though I do feel like Amoongus is a little misplaced on this team, just mostly because of Electric Train also stopping Spore stuff. But in general, I do like the idea of double redirection. I do think that Amoongus is probably the most open slot to go, though. But I really like just the Gigalith Togetic Talonflame. That's just a nice supportive core. I like what that offers the team and what it gives it. The Thievel's great value. I really like Uxie to set TR for some of these mons, and I think that it can do that really consistently. Persian K is actually a really good support mon for this team. I've used it before. It gets a lot of stuff that this team would be lacking without that slot. I actually kind of like the Steelix. I think Steelix has some pretty good value for a tier 5 Pokemon, especially. It's got some good stuff, and the Mienfoo in tier 6 is actually pretty good. That's one of probably the best tier 6s out there and opens up a couple mode options as well. So I don't disagree that it is a little bit of a transitional team, but ultimately it's kind of still has a pretty okay variety of modes. Got pretty solid support for those top offensive threats, and those top offensive threats have generally historically been pretty difficult to kind of stop. So I think it's going to work pretty well, even in its current state.
I am looking forward to seeing what this team turns into, though. But with that being said, let's move on to number 10, and we have Burst. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, so Burst. I will be honest, I very openly liked this team more than the other two. So nice job, Burst. You actually very much earned your slot this go. You were not definitely last this time. We got Genesect, Togekiss, Blastoise, Garchomp, Indeedee Male, Blacephalon, Cofagrigus, Sneasel, Appleton, Lycanroc, Midday, and Skuntank. It's kind of evident that some of the Genesect comp ideas were taken from Charles's team, which did make finals last season as well. So the Genesect Blastoise with Psychic Terrain, really, really, really strong. Super hard to prep for, and that core of things for the Genesect seems to be pretty important for its success. So I'm glad that's all here. And then you have double redirection. I mean, I love the Blastoise Togekiss. That's a ton of versatility, both because that Blastoise in of itself can be a nice offensive threat. It can be fake out. That it can follow me while the Togekiss clicks, whatever, basically anything. I love that the Togekiss gets Tailwind in this format too. That's really big. So those two work really well together. Garchomp is a really nice offensive Pokemon, especially for Tier 2. That gives you some nice oomph on that physical side, especially when Togekiss and Blastoise don't always have the best immediacy in their output. Indeedee Male Cephalon is just a really nice 2-for-1 combo. They've done really well in MDL in the past. It's very, very strong. And those mons are known to work well together. It's very hard to flowchart against, and I even like Indeedee next to a lot of other things on the team, like the Genesect and the Togekiss. The Koff Rodriguez we'll get to in a bit, but Koff is your TR setter that isn't Indeedee, and Indeedee would have to run in prison. We'll get to that. Sneasel is a nice kind of offensive support mon. It feels like kind of the only offensive support mon. I'm not 100% sure why it was the pick, though. Sneasel kind of doesn't. I mean, it does offer you, like, some weakness policy procs for the Togekiss and whatever else, but it feels like with on a team that already has psychic terrain, a lot of the appeal of Sneasel is that inner focus. So I'm not 100% sure why it's here, but it worked really well on Charles's comp as a Weavile instead. So maybe I'm jumping up the wrong gun there. Appleton's a pretty good low tier mon. It's kind of one of the better options this team has in terms of some of that um, Trick Roomy type damage stuff. I believe Appleton's pretty slow. Lycanroc Midday's pretty solid value for tier 5, and Skuntank actually is a pretty good tier 6. It's got some good moveset stuff and a really good typing. Big issues with the team. Some of the defensive typing stuff is kind of wacky here. Particularly, I don't really love the Togekiss, Garchomp, Appleton. You've got two 4x weak Ice Mons. I know, obviously, Appleton can do stuff like Ripen to weaken Thick Fat to weaken that. Isn't it Thick Fat that it gets? I know Ripen will help, but
They'll
um,
both help, yeah.
yeah, so it gets some help there, and then but even still, that does feel like a little bit of a doubling of some weaknesses at the top, and then Togekiss Blastoise also show that electric weakness. And then that kind of happens. Like each combo I really like has like a problem to it. Like the Indeedee Blacephalon, Cofagrigus, all got a dark weakness, which I do not like. So the TR mode is a little bit of the other issue in that it feels like this team doesn't have a great answer to TR. I kind of think that, and it doesn't really want to set it either. I think its best thing it's got going on there is like imprison the Indeedee and pray. But overall, I mean, it's taking a lot from things that I've seen work before and putting them in a pretty good context. I think altogether it feels like a team that was made in pairs rather than as like one cohesive whole. But the pairs themselves are really good and do have some cross contamination. So yeah, it's a pretty like all right solid team. It's gonna perform pretty well, I think. I'm gonna pass on to Dan.
Yeah, I have to like a lot of what this team is doing. It's got pretty decent immediate output with the Garchomp and the Genesect, but like you said, there's not a lot of synergy in its offenses. There's a lot of good Pokemon and a lot of good pairs, but there's not a lot of good groups of four. The most confusing thing about this team for me, though, is the Trick Room mode because it kind of like exists. It's like Cofagrigus and Appleton, and maybe Skuntank, and that can be a Trick Room mode, but it's also bad at being a Trick Room mode.
Yeah,
So
it's not enough.
I'm not exactly sure what the plan is for Trick Room, but it's not as good as the fast mode on this team. Uh, which the fast mode on this team, I just really want to click Icy Wind and Heat Wave into it just a couple times. But that's just looking at the team. I think it's really soft to Icy Wind compared to a couple other teams, but it's a solid team top to bottom. Like there's not a lot to hate about it except for the slow modes, but besides the immediate output, I don't think that there is that sort of offensive synergy that we're going to see from some of the top teams. So good, but not great at anything. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, on the Trick Room mode, I was kind of feeling the same vibe that you got, Dan. Like I kind of felt like the idea was Kafagriga's Trick Room Setter, Appleton Trick Room Sweeper, and that's just super underwhelming. Appleton in particular there. Um, if you're gonna take like a solid Trick Room Sweeper, maybe just get the Sneasel out of here and put something in that tier 4 slot that can do that. Um, but as for the faster modes, I think I like their synergy a little bit better than you guys do. Um, I realize there are definitely some shared weaknesses, and that could be a problem, but they are sort of covered for. The Togekiss Blastoise obviously sharing the electric weakness. Well, you have Garchomp to help with that. Um, Garchomp and Togekiss sharing an ice weakness. Well, you have Genesect to help with that offensively and defensively, and Blastoise to help with that defensively.
Blastoise is really nice for that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I did overstate that a bit. I'm just saying that if you looked at the team as pairs of Mons, because that's how I feel like
yeah,
it was built. But yes, I don't
yeah.
disagree that they are covered for.
Yeah. I saw this team more as like a decently cohesive lump, at least in the top half. I also like that Genesect offensively at least covers for the dark weakness on Indeedee and Blacephalon. So um, I like a lot of that stuff there. I think Genesect, Togekiss, and Garchomp is among some of my favorite type cores this season. Um, we don't really see another like serious cohesive type core on this team, but maybe that's kind of okay. There's other ways to achieve synergy, like some of the ones I just listed. Um, the fire, water, grass mons are like the boxes are checked, but Appleton and Blacephalon, for example, I don't really see them working together very much. But that's okay. I do still like the top half of this team. Um, and then, yeah, Blastoise and Togekiss, I just want to emphasize that a little bit more. Having two redirectors that also like to do a lot of other stuff outside of redirection really just unlocks both of them. So it's gonna allow you to go for like Shell Smash or Scarf on Blastoise a little bit more, like Max Crit Kiss or something, because you still have the other thing to redirect there. So that's good. So that's about all I got. And moving on to number 9, we have Ty. Dan, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ty's team I really like because it is substantially bulky. The speed control options I believe I like more than you guys, but I think Driftblim with Unburden, even though Feeny isn't the best abuser of the Tailwind from Driftblim with Unburden, it's going to be decent there. And then Porygon 2 is a really, really good Trick Room setter. It is very soft to taunt, but there's a lot of output in some of his power hitters that really want speed control, and once you get it to them, it's gonna just hit really hard. Like Feeny doesn't hit huge, isn't like a huge amount of damage from it, but it does do more than you think it does. Glastrier, of course, under Trick Room is just a win con. Xurkitree under Tailwind, we've seen do a lot of damage, especially because it can have rising voltage with that Pincurchin there. Pincurchin can operate pretty effectively under Trick Room. Magmar is a decent redirector. Licky can stop weather teams from doing a lot of things. So there's a lot that this team can do and do pretty well. Like, it works as a Tailwind team and as a Trick Room team, and it's going to be hard to prep for because there's going to be uh, both options there. So I know Taunt is the biggest weakness of this team that you guys have pointed out, but I like a lot of what this team is doing, and if they can find ways to play around that Taunt weakness, I think the output is underrated and the bulk is very good on this team. Although if they don't have uh, speed control, one thing to worry about is potentially the level of coverage coming from the Feeny, Glastrier, and the Xurkitree, because they've all got decent coverage, but they can't hit everything. So without speed control, they're more likely to die in 2 hits than they are to kill something in 1 hit, and that's something that you really need to worry about. But Ryan, why don't you tell us a bit about Ty's team?
Yeah, I actually do really like this team. It's got some other fun stuff too, like the Zerkatree Pincurchin. That's just fun. Like just spamming insane rising voltages and things like that. That's fun. And Zerkatree's pretty cool. We don't see it get a lot of usage in MDL. I also want to talk about that Zygarde 50%. That's the mon I'm most curious to see how it performs in the regular season. I'd say, just because it was undrafted last go, and I'm really interested to see how it performs, particularly on this team, where I do think there are some solid support, some solid like things that it's got going for that Zygarde, and maybe a few tiny things against it. Um, I do like it paired with Magmar though quite a bit. And generally speaking, I really like some other things. Like I think Finny Glastrier is really good, because then that way the Glastrier cannot be burned, which is great in that fairy terrain. That's really nice. P2 is an absolute just really good Pokemon. I've really come around on that thing. Oh, well, not that I had to come around, but P2 is really, really strong. The Magmar's good. I like Pincurchin, especially in that Trick Room mode. I kind of like it in the back as just like a, okay, I'm going to click Rising Voltage now in the back on the last turn of Trick Room after, whatever dies. I think that's really strong. I am the most prolific Licky Licky user in MDL, so I approve. Good way to stop other weather modes, and if you get a Licky Licky belly drum next to Magmar some game, Godspeed, my guy. The Drapion is pretty solid, and then the Dottler is kind of sort of helps with the taunt bait, because you can actually run. You could theoretically run like a Mental Herb on Dottler and that kind of thing to set TR, but my big issue with it is that I am a little worried about some of the prankster, especially some of the prankster taunt options. P2, Driftblim, Magmar, like those are mons that people are, and even Finny, are going to be mons that people are going to be like, I want to collect taunt against this, and there's not really a great deterrent for that. Um, and I do think there is a little bit of a weakness, to perhaps some like opposing status stuff. Not like hugely. I mean, obviously the fairy train's great, the misty train's great, but um, for example, Zerkatree, Pincurchin, those kind of mons, you're hitting those with Quakes, and then Glastrier. I've seen a lot of people switch to actually just running like Charm into it to kind of stall it out. I could see the same kind of thing happening a bit to Zygarde potentially. So there's just a couple like little things with this team that held me back on it, but I do really like it, and I think the fact that it's just such a bulky offensive team is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, um, with the kind of levels of power it has. What do you got, Matt?
I think you guys covered most of what I was thinking about this team. I guess I'll just two things I want to highlight. One is already written on here. I love the combination of Glastrier and Pincurchin. Ice and Electric is a really seriously strong offensive combination. Classic Bolt Beam, and we got super powerful Ice and Electric attacks coming out of both of these Trick Room sweepers. Might be a little bit hard to uh, position them together on the field in Trick Room at the same time. It might be a little bit risky to go for such a hard Trick Room mode, with both of those on your squad of four in a particular game. But Porygon 2 helps with that a lot because it's a very reliable Trick Room setter, very hard to take down. So I like those a lot. I think the the charm problem is definitely a little bit of a concern, but I like that we have this kind of classic Finny Zygarde mode here. It's not quite the same as it would be in um,
Gen
VGC,
7. Yeah.
because you're not getting that complete form. But it's still you're still getting swagger from the Finny, because we have transfer moves now, so that's going to be pretty big. Could even be big for Glastrier too. Um, and a lot of the time, something I've heard from Zygarde players, especially Anthony, has been that sometimes you don't really care if there's a bunch of attack drops coming at you. What you really want to do is just keep clicking those coils, and maybe you already have a special defense boost from the Misty Seed. You mostly just want to be unkillable, so you can kind of boost up your attack a little bit more, and in the long run, and chip down your opponents. So I could maybe see that happening here, especially because we're playing with battle tower rules instead of the regular VGC rules to accommodate some of these mythicals and restricteds. So the timer is a little bit more forgiving for slow play. So I'm wondering if that might come into play for this some of this like Finny, Zygarde, Porygon 2, super bulky kind of team a little bit. So I also want to say before we move on that this is probably the team I'm most curious about and most excited to watch. So I'm excited to see just the different things that are gonna come out every week. It's just gonna be fun. I like it a lot. And next up, number 8, we've got El Flamingo. Ryan, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So as we move on to Flamingo's comp, we see a um, quite a few notes on Colossal, but I'm gonna rate every mon that isn't Colossal out of spite for Matt. So you got Rillaboom, Spectrier, Dragonite, Bronzong, Mienshao, Wartortle, Morgrem, Wigglytuff, Quillfish, and Laleep, and then there's this Colossal on there, I guess, in tier 2. So this is I am aware the Colossal was the first pick. I just like giving Matt some trouble because a lot of the notes center around that mon. I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things I really liked about this comp that are actually outside of that mon. I'm a really big fan of the Rillaboom Spectrier Dragonite Wartortle sort of thing going on here. The reason I really like that core is that we've already seen Dragonite Spectrier do really well in like PDPL. That's a really tried and true combo. Rillaboom's just kind of strictly one of the best tier ones available. And I think it adds a really nice priority, especially to this team. That'll be good. It kind of helps the max options have some more variety as well. Um, and Fake Out's great. He has a lot of good Fake Out users too, between the Mienshao, Rillaboom, and Wartortle, Morgrem. Like that's a lot of good disruption just in the leads there. And the other reason I like this is that Wartortle actually did extremely well last season, and having it paired with something like Dragonite with that 4x Ice weakness, and having it paired next to something like that Rillaboom that also shares that Ice weakness, I really, really like that. So I generally speaking really like that offensive core. I think something like Morgrem is great value. Wigglytuff is okay. I kind of completes a Dragon Fairy Steel core. It's not a bad mon. I don't really think it's going to get a ton of usage. The Quillfish is really nice, and it does help quite a bit with the Coal mode, kind of giving you some extra options for it. And then the Leap is it's Storm Drain. It's fine. Uh, so the main thing for me with this comp that I really loved was that core. I do have some issues with the team though. I do think that there isn't enough special coverage on the team to an extent. I do think that like if you look at it like down the line, you can kind of see a mix of special physical, Spectrier is special, Colossal can be either, Dragonite can also be either physical or special, but will usually run physical. Um, Mienshao actually has a great special attacking stat, but like even the mons that can be mixed, I feel like we're leaning more physical. And mons like Spectrier don't have the best coverage, so I'm worried a little bit about coverage options on that side of the threat and level. I also don't quite get the Trick Room mode. The Bronzong can set Trick Room, and Colossal is good in Trick Room, and that's kind of it. I feel like I am not sure why there's a piece as expensive as Bronzong on this team where you could have something kind of different in that slot. Um, but overall, I really like the team. I think the Mienshao coaching option is really good. I think the redirection's good. The prankster is nice. Terrain from Rillaboom is always just a nice side benefit. And that Rillaboom does help out the TR mode a bit. Having a Rillaboom in the back with Grassy Glide, just completely ignoring any kind of speed, is always really good. And actually, the thing I like about this as a Colossal team is that it does have different options for that Colossal. So obviously, the Dragonite can do stuff with that with the inner focus, but the Wartortle also gets Aqua Jet and can proc Colossal as well independently, and also provide a water type redirection for it, which is really cool. And then Quillfish in of itself is actually a relatively consistent Colossal proc that also has Intimidate. So one thing I actually really like is that Flamingo is very easily able to build a full team and then slot in Colossal in whatever role he needs it for in a given week. And he's not strictly limited to even like the weakness policy super sweep set. Like I could see like a power or meteor beam next to War Turtle following me being actually really good. So things like that are just on the table, I think are really nice and give him some really nice versatility. I think the big thing is that the Trick Room mode is kind of underdeveloped. And again, I'll reiterate, while it does have good special attackers, I worry about the coverage on that side of things. I'll let Dan take over from this one.
Yeah, so I think Dragonite actually works really well with Colossal because
Mhm.
Dragonite has both Aqua Jet and Surf. So it has multiple ways to proc without being able to be faked out, and one of them is also immune to redirection. But I know you and I like this team a lot more than Matt did, Ryan, because we liked that this was not a colossal team. It was a good team that happened to have colossal on it. And I think that that's a distinction that Matt wasn't quite able to make in his analysis of this team, focusing, as you can tell by his notes here, pretty heavily on the colossal itself. But if you look at the rest of the team, you've got the best max Phantasm spammer in the game next to Dragonite and Rillaboom. Like, that's going to be a substantial amount of damage output. The Trick Room mode is not the best with the Bronzong and the Colossal filling out that Trick Room mode, but it's also not the worst Trick Room mode in the league either. Uh, Overall, I just think there's a lot of pieces that make sense here. Mienshao, War Turtle, Morgrem, those are really solid value support pieces in their tier, and they really complement a lot of the high tier offenses that aren't just the Colossal. So this is a team that you have to prep for like it's not a Colossal team, and then also have a way to deal with the Colossal mode if it happens to come. So I actually like this team substantially. But Matt, why don't you tell us about this Colossal team?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would like to clarify. I also wrote the note that said this team does a good job of not needing the colossal. So,
I
um,
like giving you shit. I'm sorry.
I no, I understand. Like, I think that the colossal is a little bit more central to this team than you guys do. Um, I would call this a colossal team, but it's a colossal team that, well, I mean, like the note says, it does a good job of not needing colossal. There's other stuff here that can function completely without the colossal, even if Cole's not even brought in your six in a given week. I get that. I was just not super like I wasn't super impressed by the rest of the team. Like, it's fine. Dragonite, Spectre, Rillaboom, War Turtle. I would also throw Mienshao in there. That's a piece that I do like. Um, I mean, I wasn't quite as high on that group of Mons as you guys were. They seem fine, but nothing to write home about as far as I'm concerned. Um, but I think if a good example of a team that's not a colossal team that happens to have colossal on it, I think was Anthony's team from last season. This one is seems a little bit more colossal centric. Speaking of that team, I should also mention the Dragapult note that I have up top. I realized that Dragapult was gone by the time it got to Flamingo. I'm just of the mindset that, honestly, if you can't get Dragapult first, I kind of think Colossal's not worth drafting. Obviously, other people have differing opinions. Flamingo being one of them, clearly. Um, but Dragapult just seems like the epitome of the Colossal activator. There's just nothing else that does what it does with that speed and the surf and the fake out immunity all in one. Um, I it just I personally wouldn't draft Colossal without it, but that's okay. Um,
He does have the fake out immune Surf Dragon type.
yeah, it's not
Yes.
fast enough. It's not fast enough. I don't like
It
it.
also has Aquajet, which is
Yeah,
priority.
I
Anyway,
I get that, but in a format with so many follow me users, I like
no, I
the
don't disagree, but
yeah,
Dan and I had the same thought there. So
right. I get it. Like, Dragapult just gives you the best of all worlds, so I I like that a lot. But I guess that's about all I have. It's a decent team. It's not bad. I'm not a Colossal hater either. Colossal's fine. The rest of the team is going to be decent. I know Flamingo's a good player, so I'm not trying to shit on this team. It just seemed a little bit middling to me as far as in this group of teams. So that's about it for me.
Okay.
All right. Then I think we can move on to the next slide.
Yep.
All right, then number 7, we have Dark King. So Dark has drafted the G-Max, Rillaboom, Regieleki, Incineroar, Primarina, Mamoswine, Conkeldurr, Noivern, Umbreon, Aegislash, Shedinja, and Wobbuffet. So I think I liked this team a little bit more than you guys did. This team, it just seems really, really solid all the way down. Whereas some of the other teams, like I don't know, the mid to low tier picks might drop off a little bit. Sometimes it's hard to get some value or some good stuff that fits with your team in those tiers. But I think Dark did a pretty good job of at least filling out some good types in the mid to low tiers and getting some solid value out of them as well. The core at the top it just feels to me like really classic, tried and true Gen 8 VGC good stuffs. Great Firewater Grass core with the Rillaboom, Incineroar, Primarina. Throwing Regieleki on there is just big icing on the cake. Always good to have a good electric type with a solid Firewater Grass core. Regieleki and Incineroar together, I think it's a particularly annoying lead combination. Real easy speed control there with the super fast Electro Webs. Like it's just all good shit at the top here. It's great. And then I think the a lot of his mid to low tier picks do a good job of filling out other important types. Sometimes completing type cores, sometimes not. And also getting some decent value with good ground type with the Mamoswine. Not really a Pokemon I'm a fan of personally, but a lot of people like it. It does well. Noivern, decent dragon type. Tailwind is probably the most important thing it has to offer here. Umbreon, pretty good, solid dark type for tier 4. Aegislash being a value pick for tier 5. That was something that was in tier 4 on the original version of this list, and I dropped it down because nobody ever drafts it, so I'm glad to see somebody taking it there. I think it's good for the tier. And then, Shedinja just for some maybe to cheese out a game here and there. So I think there's plenty of good stuff all the way down. I think the biggest issues here are the Trick Room matchup and the lack of like offensive support. There's plenty of defensive support here, plenty of good bulk and pivoting stuff with Incineroar and Snarl spam with Umbreon or stuff like that. But I'd like to see maybe some more obvious like weakness policy procs. Maybe you can get creative with that with the stuff you have here. Maybe some other stuff with like I don't know, screeched fake tears, even something with helping hand. I think the only thing with helping hand here it might be Umbreon. I don't think anything else here gets it, but I might be wrong on that. Trick Room matchup could be a little bit awkward. Conkeldurr is slow, so that's good. That'll help with at least some Trick Room matchups. And I think with the bulk and the disruption that he has available to him, the priority and the fake outs on Rillaboom and Incineroar, he's got the tools to at least like manage an opposing Trick Room mode and try to stall out Trick Room, but I worry that if he's not bringing the right stuff and not using his tools correctly, there are definitely some Trick Room modes that might be able to roll this team. And the last point is that I would have liked to see him take advantage of the format options a little bit more because this is a pretty strict Series 9 team. I'm not even really seeing many transfer moves here that are going to matter. He has no follow me user at all. No mythicals or restricteds, but that's less important. It's more about the lack of follow me here. But I know Ryan had some thoughts about that last point as well. Ryan,
Yeah.
you want to take over here?
Yeah, my big thing with this team is that there is so much like redirection. Like even if it was just Rage Powder, there is so much redirection on this list that it feels like to me that without that redirection, man, do like counter leads really open up to your team, I feel like. Like this team is probably like yes, it has really good fake out users, but if you have some kind of setup that is immune to fake out or doesn't require it, coughs in the last team, you can like expect it to happen. Because there isn't anything stopping some of those modes that I know people have. The Trick Room matchup's really awkward on this comp. And I think that it's a little understated because while we have talked about some awkward Trick Room modes on prior teams that are a little lower, I think this one not even having like a thing with Trick Room is concerning. And then again, I feel like there is a little bit of some defensive type synergies down that I actually really generally like this team. I do feel like there are a couple of like overlapped fighting weaknesses I don't love. Particularly when I feel like the Incineroar and Umbreon are your like primary supporty type Pokemon. I kind of wish they both weren't fighting weak, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think I'd just love to see there's really good prankster in this format. There's really good redirection in this format. There's plenty of things that get Trick Room that do more than just set Trick Room. If there's like a couple things that are just swapped around on here, this is probably my favorite team. I mean, I pretty much the Rillaboom, Alecki, Incin, Prim, Conkeldurr, Noivern, and Umbreon. I mean, sign me up. Like I love that. All of what I just listed. It's just that while all those things are good, the team can't help but feel incomplete compared to a lot of the teams that I ranked higher than it because they have those things the format offers in addition to having really good cores and mons and things like that. Overall, it's a really good team though. I'm excited to see it get played. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually really liked this team. I think it's got the best Fire Water Grass core in the league. And on top of that, it's got really good non-traditional speed control with the Regieleki and Noivern being probably as good as it's going to get outside of Prankster, Tailwind, and Crobat as in terms of a Tailwind setter. Uh, I do think it could really use a Trick Room setter, and actually where I'd look for that is that Umbreon slot, because Incineroar and Umbreon aren't the same Pokemon, but there is a lot of role overlap there. So instead of feeling like you have two different Pokemon, you've got like 1.4 different Pokemon between those two slots. So if you take that Umbreon out and bring in some sort of Trick Room setter into that slot, and I believe Tier 4 generally has good ones. I don't know if any are available off the top of my head, then I think this team is looking a lot better in terms of being able to threaten dual speed control with things like Incineroar and Primarina that can take advantage of either form of speed control. So that's really my big thing about this team. Like it's not soft to Trick Room because it has good Pokemon that can function in Trick Room, but without being able to threaten its own Trick Room, it's forced to try to overspeed the opponent, which is potentially an issue for it. But overall, I like the team.
All right, moving on then. Number 6, Joey. Ryan, I'll pass this one to you.
Yes. So Joey's team, we have Vintini, Zamazenta, Rotom Wash, Duraludon, Zarude, Snorlax, Aerodactyl, Runerigus, Togepi, Toxapex, and Pinsir. Just the top half of this team is very solid, reliable Pokemon. I also would agree that a lot of the type weaknesses are distributed pretty well throughout this team. There's some good like overall synergistic defensive typings going on here that I'm quite a fan of. Um, the Snorlax is very much the primary like Trick Room sweeper, but it has some pretty good defensive synergy with some of the other picks on this comp, so it does work. Um, and it has that Tailwind that's coming in from the Aerodactyl and the Runerigus and the Togepi. And while those do really make up a lot of the support core of the team, perhaps something that was a little bit more like I'm clicking helping hand, I'm clicking this would be nice for this comp that isn't that's kind of outside those mods. So I think I want to talk about a couple things with this team. The first, Pinsir based pick. Great. I love that as a tier 6 mon. I think it's really cool. And this team's just kind of neat in its composition. I just really like how neat it is. I'm actually really excited to see it get played. Um, Duraludon is very good value for this because of its ability to ignore redirection and lightning rod and a lot of things that got a lot of use in this format. Um, one of the main problems with this team really is that a lot of these mons in their individual tier I have seen sort of underperform. So what I mean by that is something like Zarude. Um, I've seen Zarude do okay. I've seen Lax do okay a few times, but those kind of mons tend to be pretty polarized in their performances historically. Um, I think some of the faster end speed tiers are a little lacking too on some stuff. Ventini's a great mon, but it does only have base 100 in its offensive stats, which is a little lower for this format. The Zamazenta is kind of helping carry that. Rotomosh is in a similar spot where it's got good offenses, but compared to some of the mythicals and some on what the output some of the other teams are able to really put off with things like prankster support, it's not quite getting everything it needs to, I feel. I also don't understand the Toxapex. I'm excited for Toxapex. I don't super get it. I also don't love some of the frailty, and honestly, Max Bug into a few mons on this team is a little scary. Um, but overall, I mean, it's a pretty well put together comp with pretty solid options up and down. I think a little bit more support would be good, and I think some of the picks, while extremely fun, I think Zarude, Snorlax, and mons like that, if I'm just looking at it from a team standpoint, they're not always going to be the most optimized picks, as in my opinion, based on the performances we've seen from them. What do you got from me, Matt?
Not much beyond what you already mentioned. I'll expand on a couple of points. I think that the team definitely wants some more support to go alongside some of these Pokemon that are going to be performing inside of a fast mode. I mean, mainly you have Aerodactyl, but Aerodactyl is not that great at support beyond just being a tailwind
Tailwind.
setter. For the
Yeah.
most part, it's going to set tailwind and do damage, and maybe have like a bit of utility with like a taunt or a wide guard or something like that. But it's not going to provide the kind of disruption or offensive support as like a prankster mon or something like that you could use with like fake tears, Thunderwave or whatever. Some of these mons like Zamazenta, Rotom, Duraludon have some things that they can do supportively, like coaching or Howl on Zamazenta, or like Electro Web, Will-O-Wisp, Rotom, maybe Breaking Swipe and Snarl on Duraludon, stuff like that. They have little bits of support, but I would kind of like to see some kind of a glue piece that holds this all together, because right now, like the stuff at the top, like, seems, it all looks really good together, but it feels like they all have to sort of exist, not all of them, but they, like, at least a good group of them have to exist together to kind of hold themselves together, rather than having one thing that can support a lot of different things at the same time. So that's something I would like to see. Snorlax, I found a little bit questionable as the primary Trick Room sweeper, because usually we think about Snorlax as something that needs to set up before it really clicks the go button,
Right.
which is maybe not that big of a deal here, because I like the synergy with the Runerigus and the Togepi, but that is also a pretty heavy dedicated Trick Room mode if you're bringing those three mons just plus one more, which might be okay sometimes, but I would also hope maybe that other kinds of Snorlax sets might be seen here that don't necessarily require the belly drum, but it's not something I've ever attempted, so I'm not really sure how well that's actually going to work. It might do fine, you know, but those are mostly my thoughts, just expanding on a couple of points that you made. Dan?
Yeah, I feel like you guys covered a lot of it. The team's got decent speed control, decent support, but Togepi kind of underwhelms compared to some of the other Follow Me users in the format. But for Tier 5, it is what it is. One thing I will say is this team has a lot of immediate damage outside of max because you're threatening like V create Victini and close combat Zamazenta. But Victini doesn't love being a max option, and Zamazenta can't max. So this team has like a weird disparity where it's going to be doing more damage without maxing most of the time, and its max is going to be more defensive. And I think that's going to be sort of a weird dichotomy that Joey's going to have to play around throughout the entire season, and I'm pretty excited to see how it works.
All right, moving on. Number 5, we have Tay. All right, so this is a well-built Mew team, which is a really easy way into my heart. Mew is a Pokemon that I have a lot of love for. I've used several times in draft. Um, so this team includes Mew, Urshifu, Single Strike G-Max, Clefable, Landorus Incarnate, Rabombi Escavalier, Jellicent, Dragalge, Lurantis, Miltank, and Cumbuskin. So, like I said, the top part of this team, the whole Mew core really is extremely strong, very cohesive, very synergistic. Um, everything like the Urshifu, Clefable, and Rabombi especially just look like they're really built around Mew, and I love that a lot because Mew is a Pokemon that I think a lot of people before they use it think is really splashable. Like, oh, it gets every move, it can do kind of everything, anything you want in draft. I've found that not to be the case in my time using it, and it's something that you really need to build around to really optimize it. So I love the type core that you've created here with the dark and fighting on the Urshifu. Really good way to just murder those dark and ghost types all in one mon. Clefable with Mew has incredible synergy, allows Mew to set up with whatever it wants. Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, Dragon Dance, whatever you got. The only thing it's really missing is like a Quiver Dance, but that's okay. Um, Rabombi, I think, is going to be able to provide incredible offensive support for Mew. It's going to be able to hit dark types incredibly well, being both bug and fairy. If it's doing damage at all, I love the support with the Tailwind. It's basically just a slightly slower Crobat in terms of being a Tailwind setter because it has that fake out immunity. It's got some good weakness policy proc moves for Mew. It has access to fake tears, some other supportive moves like Struggle Bug, Helping Hand, Screens, I think, or at least Charm. Um, so the Mew part of this team is fantastic. Excuse me. The Landorus, I don't really get. Like, it seems fine. It's maybe a good way to hit steel types, which Mew's not gonna at least not gonna be able to do with its stabs. But you do have the Urshifu as well. Does a decent job of filling out other types that you might not otherwise have. Decent max option, at least if you're running it physical. Has access to Airstream there. Um, I definitely like the Trick Room mode here. The Jellicent works well with the Clefable. Clefable does a great job of covering for the dark weakness on both the Mew and the Jellicent. Jellicent to Scavalier, I think, is a fantastic Trick Room combination. The water on Jellicent covering for Scavalier's fire weakness. And then we have some other strong Trick Room options here with the Dragalge Lurantis. I think that I like all of these Trick Room combinations. There just might be a little bit too much Trick Room stuff down here. The Escavalier I think is fantastic. If I was going to drop anything, it would be either the Dragalge or the Lurantis. Um, but I think one or both of those slots could just maybe diversify the team a little bit better if it was used for something else. Firewater Grass Core, I know Tay was trying to fill out that down near the bottom here. Personally, I mean the Jellicent and Lurantis, yes, those two can work together, no problem. That's a good pair. The Cumbuskin is just not cutting it. Like this kind of feels like an attempt to just check all the type boxes without really thinking about how exactly they're going to work together. And even if Cumbuskin was good, I think it's just not really going to pair well with the Jellicent and Lurantis. down here at the bottom, I don't even think you necessarily need to complete the type core, especially if there's not really a decent fire type available. So I don't think it's a huge deal there. But yeah, overall, really like this team. This last note was put here by Dan. I think it is probably the worst take Dan has ever had in his life, but I'll let him explain that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as someone who used Mew very recently, Mew is a very splashable Pokemon that can fit onto a lot of different teams because it's got access to a lot of different moves in the game. But where I've found it to be the most useful is as a support option, not necessarily as a setup sweeper. I remember someone's name who ran with Blat Blausina last season talking about a coach who had Mew saying that they weren't taking enough advantage of the support move pool and were just focusing too much on having 3 attacks and protect on it, as opposed to really diving into Mew's support pool. And I really do think I think that coach was onto something at that point in time. I think the support move pool for Mew is really what sets it apart. But on this team, it might sort of be pigeonholed into being the max option when this team goes fast because uh, Urshifu doesn't really like maxing. It likes having its guaranteed crits, and it doesn't really get a lot out of maxing. Landorus likes taking advantage of sheer force, especially the incarnate form. So it's not really the best Pokemon to be maxing either. And then Rabambi and Clefable aren't max options, and everything else is in your Trick Room mode. So in the fast mode, like you're sort of forced into maxing the Mew because nothing else really loves it. And that forces you into a more offensive Mew almost every week, and you're not really able to dive into that support pool as much, which is my biggest critique of the fast mode. But I do think the slow mode on this team is really good. Like, I absolutely love Escavalier, Jellicent, and Dragalge working together. Lurantis adds a little bit of flavor that could come. Uh, so I think this slow mode and the fact that you get Clefable to help get it set up is again going to be one of the better parts of this team. One thing that this team does make me a bit nervous, though, is that if you look at the main offensive options, again, outside of the Mew with its base 100 attack and special attack, the main offensive options like the Urshifu, Landorus, Escavalier, they all have a quad weakness to a common spread move in Heat Wave, Dazzling Gleam, and then to a lesser extent Icy Wind for the Landorus, but even that's not really going to be fun for it. So the redirector feels like it's getting a bit less value out of offensive play because of how common these spread moves are that are super effective against this team. But overall, I do think it's a really solid team. I think uh, Matt is a little too high on the Mew on this team in particular, though, because it is going to be pigeonholed into more offensive Mew, and it's not really going to dive into the support Mew sets. One other quick note is that Rabambi is going to have to put in a lot of work. I know it's got unfake outable Tailwind, and it's really going to have to lean on that because the speed tiers for the fast mode are decent, but not exceptional. So when he wants to go fast, he is going to have to rely a lot on that Tailwind. So I think it's a good team with a lot of solid options, but I actually think that the Mew is going to be too pigeonholed away from its best sets, which are those support sets. But Ryan, what do you think?
Hello, I'm the guy in the middle on this team. I like this team a fair bit. I do agree with some of the points about the max options. I do think you're underestimating Urshifu a little and Landorus a little bit as max options, particularly Landorus I. Landorus I max airstream is an absolute nuke. But yes, I was particularly worried about a lot of the speed control coming from that Rabambi. I don't love how that looks in flowcharting. And I would like to compliment Tay on something that I think a lot of people think is really easy in draft, but is difficult, and that is high tier psychic types. Because there are just a lot of psychic types in the game, and psychic has some very unfortunate type weaknesses that are very hard to navigate throughout a draft defensively. And having that Mucil Fable, I think, is very tried and true. I think it's going to work great. And I think that the fact that I'm looking at this team and I'm not sitting here going, wow, I'm really worried about, the defensive synergy of the team. That's really nice. I do agree with that 4x weaknesses point, though. There's some other fun stuff, though. One thing I actually really like about some of these TR modes is that they can't TR mons as they can work outside of a TR context. I particularly think Lurantis and Jellicent could really pair nicely with Rabambi, like as just out of nowhere, like a fast Jellicent clicking Water Spout, or a Lurantis getting a setup next to the Rabombi. You know, Rabombi charms it and Lurantis maxes or whatever. Like that kind of stuff can be really fun,
I
which
do add in
definitely
on.
gives this team some depth. I think that wouldn't be there otherwise. But yes, I do like this team quite a bit. I'm excited to see Tay play with it. Um, but if I were him, I would maybe look at that Combuskin, and maybe if he can find something he thinks will be a good option for perhaps the Landorus slot, like just something that really clicks that together for me. I think this might be my favorite team. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I do want to add in on the surprise fast mode. Dragalge can outspeed base 130s under Tailwind,
That
so
is true.
watch out for.
Watch out.
I will say that I realize the support version of Mew is not going to be as good here. I think there are some matchups where it can still come out. Um, the Mew team from last season lended itself a little bit more to support Mew than this one does, and the reason that I had more of an issue with just putting 3 attacks plus protect on Mew is mostly because these these mythicals with base 100s across the board. Um, I may have said this earlier in the video, but when they max, the problem is more the offense rather than the defense. They have pretty good natural bulk, and they just need some help with that damage output. So if you're just well, I mean, I guess that's true whether you max it or not. Um, so I think the 3 attack plus protect kind of thing on a Pokemon like Mew or Victini or Jirachi is not something I usually like to see because those Pokemon aren't being taken advantage of to to the fullest extent offensively. I like the amount of offensive support that this team has from Mew because in my experience, playing with Mew pretty extensively in MBC, that is where Mew shines the most because it has access to every max move in the game, physical or special, and this team just has a lot of ways to just propel it forward. So, and I think that if you have to sacrifice the effectiveness of the support version of Mew to boost up the offensive version, I think that's more than worth it. So those are my thoughts. Also, Rabombi is actually kind of a decent max option. I've done it before and it works, especially because you can go for follow me Quiver Dance, so that's kind of fun. You guys ready to move on? Anything else on this one?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, number 4, we've got Josh. Ryan?
Okay. Yeah, so welcome. This is the high-ranked Celesteela comp. It's pretty classic, but it's got some interesting ideas going on in it. So we got Celesteela, Tapu Lele, Marowak, Naganadel, Pelipper, Ludicolo, Electivire, Slurpuff, Pangoro, Mr. Mime Galar, and Chargebug. Um, so yeah, this is it's Steela and Rain. Gasp. It's with a lightning rod user, but there is a couple spins on this that I do like. I actually really like the Lele and the Naganadel here. They give this team a little bit more diversity in terms of how it can approach attacks. Tapu Lele did really well last season in this format. So I'm pretty excited to see particularly that Mon and see how it performs again this season. And when you pair that with something like a Slurpuff and a tier 4, I mean, that's just really nice. Um, the Marowak is one of definitely the more interesting picks on the team. Um, it's I've been thinking about it because on one hand, I was like, well, Marowak is weak to water, so you do have that slight anti-synergy between the rain mode and the Marowak, but I was also thinking of various times I've seen Steela teams, and a lot of the time, um, I've noticed that if there's like a big electric threat, like it might actually be okay to like swap in Marowak. The opposing team might not have a water type attack to go into the rain mode with. So I think that will work out. It could be a little awkward on occasion, but I think overall that's going to work pretty well. Um, I'm a big fan of the speed on this team too. There's kind of some lower speed options and then some super speedy stuff. So having like Unburdened Slurpuff and Swift Slim Ludicolo and something as insanely fast as Naganadel, coupled with some good speed control options too, like that Slurpuff, like that Pellet Burr Tailwind, and even things like Mr. Mime Galar can spam very fast Icy Winds, all things considered. So there's some good stuff there too. And I like the Mr. Mime Galar. I think Pangoro, Marowak, does help provide a bit of that TR mode mons that you need. And that those are mons that in TR are very threatening. And Steela in of itself, of course, is very threatening. The team, I would agree, it does lean a little bit on the special side. So physical Steela seems like it's going to come a little more often. I do really also, I want to comment that even with Marrow A as the Lightning Rod user, the fact that this team has Electivire also alleviates a lot of pressure on that role because Electivire with Follow Me Motor Drive really gives it that versatility. And I've had a lot of fun in MDC building with Electivire recently. It's actually a really good mon when you give it some of its transfer moves. And even things like Electroweb that it has can do surprisingly well. Um, and those are kind of my main thoughts. I think this team is pretty good top to bottom. It's very multimodal. It's got overall a lot of really good stuff going for it. Um, I'm a little worried about Tapu Lele and Marowak both having that ghost weakness a little bit. That's probably my biggest thing, actually. Just because I don't love it when two really high tier Pokemon have that kind of a shared weakness. And I do think Mime G as your TR setter, Mime G, it's not that Mime G is the only TR setter is a bad thing, because I know Matt has that note. It's that Mime G has like 800 moves it wants to run that aren't Trick Room. And the fact that if you want to run a Trick Room Marowak or you want to run a Pangoro 1 week, the fact that Mime has to give up a move slot for Trick Room, I don't love. And then Charge Bug's really fun. I can't deny that its ability is very fun, and considering some of the tier 6 options that were available, I do think it was pretty good value, and I think it can pop off with things, especially like the Naganadel. What do you got, Dan?
So this team's interesting because there's some role redundancy and role expansion questions that I have about it, and I don't know if it ends up as a net positive or net negative. So I really liked this team, and I will point out that in our average of rankings, teams 2 through 4 were all tied. So this team could have been rated as high as number 2 based on our average rankings. Uh, but the Marowak A and the Electivire are interesting because you want that Electric Immune Follow Me and you want Lightning Rod, and you have both of those. But Raichu also does both of those in tier 2 and can also let you have a different Trick Room option in tier number 4. And I do think this team has a bit of trouble with Trick Room because that Marowak A is also the best Trick Room answer, but it's still base speed 45, so it's a little fast to be a primary Trick Room answer as well. Uh, so there's just a combination of like, is this interesting combination that eschews the conventional wisdom of the Raichu in that spot going to end up as a net positive or net negative for this team? And I don't really know. I do think Slurpuff is going to be awesome on this team, like Lele, Slurpuff, and then get Celesteela in next to a Slurpuff. Like that's an awesome mode. Same with the Naganadel. Uh, but I do think it is a bit Trick Room soft, and part of me thinks this team would be better with Raichu in a different tier 4, but I'm very interested to see how it plays out. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, the Marowak as the lightning rod user is something that I found questionable, not necessarily bad, but it does. I mean, you're right. It does deviate from the kind of classic Celesteela Raichu combination, which is something that I have a little bit more faith in, just because we know it works. I'm curious to see how this one plays out, but I also liked the point that Ryan made that Electivire having a presence here makes something like that Raichu a little bit less necessary and kind of fills that role a little bit as well. So the Electivire here, I think, is definitely a very nice touch. Um, uh, let's see. I guess the only other thing, the Mime G as the only Trick Room setter was something that definitely stuck out to me, but I think Ryan pretty much covered everything about that. The One of the big things for me is that this team is very Celesteela centric but without a ground type. Obviously, not the whole thing is about Celesteela. You have some other modes. The Lele and the Ganondorf modes do a good job of diversifying things here. But ground types, to me, on Celesteela comps are kind of mandatory. It's if you can get a good Earthquake user for one thing, it's just nice to be able to click that next to Celesteela, and it is the one type that is hitting both of Celesteela's weaknesses. Does a great job of providing some offensive synergy with that Celesteela being able to hit those fire and electric types, and even some of those fire and electric types like the Rotom forms, or especially Rotom Heat, or like Moltres or something that are going to be immune to ground. Most ground types are going to have access to rock too, so you'll do a decent job of helping kill the things that would kill the Celesteela. So I don't know exactly where the ground type would be here. If there is, I don't know exactly what's left in tier 2. If there's a good tier 2 ground type, maybe scrap the Naganadel for that, even though I think the Naganadel is still decent here. But yeah, would definitely like to see a ground type here. Seems important for me on Celesteela comp.
Marowak as the Rock Slide and Earthquake user is not bad either because it's still
It's not
immune to a
bad.
lot.
It does help. I'd still like to see a real ground type. Maybe does anyone have Kanto Marowak? I can't remember. I'm not sure,
I
but
don't believe so.
I don't know. Maybe drop the Alolan Marowak and go for Kanto in one of the middle tiers. Who knows? But anyway, that'll do it for number 4. And number 3 is me. Dan, why don't you tell me why my team is terrible?
Well, I mean, we do have your team rated number 3, so it's not terrible. Um, but you copied John's homework, but decided to change it just a little bit with the Marshadow Thunderous team. We know that that was a very solid offensive core. Adding the Kartana makes a lot of sense to it, even if it is, a Kartana and made out of paper, both literally and figuratively. But offensively, this team is very solid. It's got the Hypnosis bot in the Crobat in Tier 3 that can also set Tailwind occasionally. Inteleon is very fast. It is a fast team, top to bottom, for the most part. I am going to talk about one of your treatises about redirection with Volcrona. The fact that you have the Volcrona and you're going to be able to allow it to be flexible because you have Follow Me Electabuzz, so opponents can't completely ignore your redirection by teching safety goggles will mean that your Volcrona will actually be able to use Rage Powder more freely because it's less likely to be ignored. And it also has that setup offensive option as well. But overall, a lot of offensive synergy. If you bring your fast mode, it's going to go really fast. But if you bring the fast mode, you're incredibly weak to Trick Room, so you have to have your Trick Room options as well. You have your favorite Copperajah and Executor A. Executor A as the Trick Room setter is a little sketch in my book. I've never been a huge fan of it. Like I see it for what it is and its value for its tier. Like you can make it work, but it does make me pretty nervous on this team. Copperajah is obviously very, very good in Trick Room. But when I'm looking at this team and I'm thinking, what 6 would you bring in a given week? I don't like that it feels like you're forced to bring Copperajah and Executor A most weeks and then have a fast mode because they don't really feel like they fit super well with a lot of the things on the fast mode. So I think there's that dichotomy that isn't my favorite thing about this team, but otherwise, I do think it is very solid. Probably the most offensively threatening fast mode team, or at least one of them, uh, in the league with a good balance between special and physical and good fast speed control. It's just the slow mode makes me a little nervous thinking on a week to week basis how often will you just be forced to have things that aren't actually going to be effective for what your main game plan is going to be. But Ryan, what do you think of the team?
Yeah, a lot of the same thoughts. One thing I was a little worried about was the Kartana and the Copperajah both having pretty substantive fire weaknesses because Kaparaj's Spit F is bad, and Kartana's is worse. So the fact that you have something like an Inteleon here is actually one of the things that really sold me on the team, both because Inteleon's a good support mon with things like Icy Wind, but also because it absolutely murders fire types. Which is something your team definitely needed. So I am really glad to see that mon here. I do quite like the Electabuzz redirection. And I think that that'll end up working out really well for you. And I do think the redirector slash stalling out the trick room might be one of your best plays into it. I also could see you just saying, I'm going to use my sniper and Teleon, and I'm going to nuke whatever's about to set trick room. And that's kind of what sold me on the team, really, is that I'm looking at it and I'm like, while it's arguably as trick room soft as some other teams, the fact that you do have Kaparaja Executor, I do have a lot of faith in those mons being able to perform in Trick Room, but not only that, I kind of think your fast mode might be the best one, period. Like, you kind of just can blitzkrieg a lot of teams. And I kind of like, especially when I get into the teams I like a lot, I kind of do an analysis of, how does this team generally compare against other teams in the middle and at the bottom? And I generally think a lot of your matchups are pretty strong just off your offensive Pokemon. It feels like there are some mons here that take advantage of some type weaknesses I've been seeing on teams, particularly that Marshadow, just kind of down the board, which really helped it. I think Cubone in Tier 6 is going to be fun. I just drafted it in a Little Cup League, and while obviously it does have that Lightning Rod, it actually can use Thick Club, and it actually doesn't hit, it can hit okay, which does help the Trick Room mode out a little bit. I don't know how much. That remains to be seen how well Cubone performs next to Mythicals, but I am interested to see that. So no, I think this is a really good comp. Definitely, I a dog ate my notes, but I do think that you probably found Johnny's. So, and then did some tweaks that make it a little better, I think, actually, than that comp was.
Yeah, Cubone, by the way, just so everybody knows, has the same base attack as Azumarill, and
Mm.
Thick Club and Huge Power are the same damage modifiers. So as long as we're all
Yes, they
clear
are.
on that. So
I am very aware.
I thought that was fun. Maybe I'll never use it. I don't know. I kind of just wanted some kind of a ground type, and that seemed to have decent damage output, even though it wasn't a great type filler because it's in tier 6. You're not going to find good type fillers down there, but it was it was the best I could do. Um, yeah, I mean the Marshadow Thundurus was like I knew Marshadow was near the top of my list for Pokemon I was interested in starting this draft with. I didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to put next to it. I started looking and just kind of decided, yeah, the Thundurus. Like I don't usually like repeating things that I or somebody else have done in the past, unless I'm just trying to draft completely optimally and don't give a shit about anything but winning. But I'm still trying new shit here. But it was really hard to ignore how good of a combination those two are, and there was just nothing else in tier 1 that I could justify taking next to Marshadow. It was like it was just such a good combo. But um, I wanted to make sure that I was using some other interesting things, trying out some other stuff. The Obstagoon pick in particular with the Marshadow was something I zeroed in on pretty early because John had that too last season, but dropped it very early. And Obstagoon's a Pokemon that I've been wanting to make work for a long time, and I think Marshadow is like the partner that can actually make it work. I think their synergy offensively and defensively both is actually pretty damn good. Um, the rest of this team, yeah, I was mostly just trying to fill out a lot of offense with a decent Trick Room mode near the bottom. Executor, not the best, but kind of the best with what I could do with that slot. I needed some kind of a Trick Room setter. Electabuzz as a redirector I've been looking to use for quite a while, and the big physical threats on this team are going to enjoy it a lot, I think, because I drafted it specifically because it resists Steel Spike, and I started with, Marshadow Thundurus as two of my big physical attacking threats. Um, Firewater Grass Core here is mostly made up of Well, some comfort picks and also Kartana. I'm like Kartana's kind of part of my quest to find a grass type I actually like, at least a high tier grass type. So we'll see how that goes. Even though it's got some pretty obvious weaknesses, and also a lot of the offense here. Uh, I wanted to kind of fix something that I felt was wrong with my draft in Dan's Premier League, which was um, I wanted a large amount of Pokemon that could function both as offensive threats and kind of as support pieces, week to week. So I think I have enough stuff here to be able to swap between those. A lot of these Pokemon near the top, some more than others, are able to function as support pieces, at least a little bit. So I'm looking forward to the flexibility of some of these mons as well. So that's about all I have on mine.
Matt, when I'm asked about my team, I'm just like, yeah, it looks tight. Let's play it, just so people don't know things. But I really respect you talking longer than Dan and I did.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, look, I've got plenty of stuff that I'm intentionally not
All right,
saying
moving
here,
on
so.
to the number 2 team in the second spot,
Oh,
we have
Dan.
Dina.
All right, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying this was one of the more divisive teams we rated. Ryan and I had her at number 1 and number 2 respectively in our ratings, and Matt had her down at number 7. So we'll get to his opinions on this team in a little bit. But the first thing you notice is that this is a Sun Trick Room team that also has access to Blastoise and very good offensive support with the Meowstic. So there's a lot of just immediate offensive potential with this team, and it it can hit really hard. Like the Venusaur and the Blastoise are both good max options, and the Venusaur and Blastoise can also both work as support options out of max with Sleep Powder or Fake Out, Follow Me, Yawn, all that, all sorts of good things. Raichu is a great support option for the Blastoise, not necessarily as much for the Venusaur, but it does help a bit. Torkoal, obviously, the Trick Room option that supports the Venusaur. Comfy is actually my biggest concern about this team because it can work as a priority proc on the Blastoise for a weakness policy or set Trick Room. But I do think there were better Trick Room setters in Tier 3 uh, based on what this team might need it to provide. I think the Meowstic works really well on this team. Magmortar is a solid secondary redirector that can also take advantage of sun boosted heat waves, for example. Drempa is a great Trick Room attacker. Scolipede, Boltund, and Munchlax are, they're decent for what they do in the tier, all decent value. Munchlax is hilarious in tier 6 because it might actually come in some Trick Room sets. So there's a lot to like offensively about this team. I think the biggest weak spot is that Comfey because I do think it has a bit of role redundancy with the Raichu for the proc. And if you're not using it for the proc and just using it as the Trick Room setter, there are better Trick Room setters in that tier. Now, the biggest weakness I see for this team is Max Quake and Snarl. And the reason I say that is that it is so overwhelmingly special. The physical options on this team are physical Blastoise, physical Boltund, and Scolipede. And I think that's it. Maybe if you run offensive Raichu, that'll be
Munchlax
physical.
too.
Oh, and Munchlax, yeah.
Belly
Like,
Drum Magmortar?
True.
maybe.
Maybe.
I've yet to be convinced that that's a real set. I'm sure she's going to bring it against me now, but I've yet to be convinced it's a real set. But this team is just so overwhelmingly special with its best options that it seems like this is a team I might even call Assault Vest Week at different, like to some extent, because of just how overwhelmingly special it is. So that's the biggest weakness of the team, and I do think that Comfy slot is a bit redundant and can be switched into a better Trick Room setter. Maybe a physical Ghost type Trick Room setter, like I don't know if Dusknoir is in that tier or available, but I think that would make this team potentially even pushing it up into that number 1 spot. But Ryan, I know you also like this team, so
I
why don't
like
you
this
tell us
team a
what you
lot.
like in?
I like this team enough to put it at number 1. I really think Sunroom is good. And this is a very good Sunroom team in a lot of ways. I do think that it was a little bit too special for me, but my God, the output of some of these mons. I mean, like the Torkoal in of like Torkoal Drampa in of itself in TR, it's like, yeah, you can like Quake boost, but like I don't think you live that anyway, you know? Uh like it's difficult to handle, I think, just a lot of the immediacy of the output. I love how multimodal this team is. A lot of things can support each other in different ways. I do think you guys are sleeping a little bit on Comfey, both because I think that its healing tools are really nice, especially for something like Gmax Blastoise, giving that kind of a mon some longevity. Gmax Vino can actually live hits pretty okay once you get some SpDef boosts in it, especially. So, like, Comfey can do some pretty okay stuff there. The Meowstic's another fantastic support piece for this team, and just the ability to get some immediate damage going is very nice. And I like that the Raichu and Blastoise are both follow me users that can follow me for most of this team and make it work really well. And I think that added a lot to the consistency of the team. Um, I do think that there are a couple of the notes that are things where I do sort of agree. I don't think Magmortar would the note Magmortar seems superfluous. I normally wouldn't quite agree with that since it has a different role than Torkoal, but with how overwhelmingly special this team is, yes, Belly Drum Magmortar's a thing. I've seen Matt sweep with it like 3 or 4 times. That might be better suited as a non-fire type physical attacker. Like say, for example, Marowak could be that slot, something like that. I don't know, just a thought. Marowak K, I think, isn't it tier 3 this go around? Something like that, I think I'd prefer.
It is
Or well,
three
that would
mag.
be tier 3. But
Yeah,
yeah, anyway. Magmortar's tier 4.
Like
I don't know.
me.
Find something in tier 4 that fits that really well, because I like your tier 3 supports quite a bit. But overall, I mean, it's very multimodal. I really like that it feels like there's just a lot of set versatility here. Most of these mons can run multiple different sets, and they all can operate well and differently. And I actually do really like the Boltund here. I know that there is the potential thought of, oh, well, Raichu has Lightning Rod. Boltund might get in the way of that. It's like, Raichu can run static if need be, if you want to bring both. And honestly, Boltund has proven itself, in my opinion, to be pretty consistent at just being very annoying and disruptive over time. So I think that's going to work well. And Munchlax in tier 6, I mean, my God, just adding just an absolutely monstrous Pokemon at the very end of the draft that uh, gives you another auto sweep option on top of everything else. So I'm a big fan of this comp. I do think there are a couple slight things I'd change about it, but really nice job, Dina. I think it's really, really good. What do you got, Matt?
So just a few things. Magmortar, Belly Drum Magmortar is definitely a very real set. I've only swept with it twice, so giving me a little bit more credit than I deserve. But I think if it stays on this team, there's actually going to be enough pressure from the overwhelming specialness of the rest of the team to actually uh, kind of force it to come out once or twice, even though I think once or twice is sort of the maximum you should expect that sort of set to come out in a season. Um, the Comfy, I think I like a little bit more than you guys,
What?
mostly because it does have Tailwind
I love
via
that
transfer,
Comfey.
so that I think is actually going to be an important part of this team. Um, the tier fives, I don't really care for that much. Scolipede seems like I don't want to say a throwaway pick. What's a nicer way of saying a throwaway pick? I don't know. It's something that Dina seemed curious about and wanted to try. I don't really see how it fits with the rest of the team, but maybe that's not that big of a deal. It's at least a physical attacker, gives her a couple types she doesn't already have. The Boltund, I think, is more the thing that doesn't really fit very well here, uh, because most of what Boltund kind of wants to do uh, one of two things, and maybe both at the same time. Either offensive support with Howl for physical attackers, which there aren't really any here that are going to benefit from that very much. Or, like Ryan said, disruption with stuff like Nuzzle, Snarl, Eerie Impulse, whatever. Um, which Raichu is able to do well enough. It's not that I don't think it's really a problem that like the lightning rod might get in the way of what Bolton wants to do. It's more that they kind of do the same thing, and I don't really see them being brought together. Even though Bolton is a little bit faster, but you could probably do something a little bit better with that slot. Um, the Magmortar, yeah, I think Ryan hit the nail on the head when he said that something else you could get out of that tier 4 slot to diversify the team is kind of what makes Magmortar more superfluous than it otherwise might be, because you do have two other Follow Me users already on the team. You have a Fire type, even though Magmortar being quite a bit faster than Torkoal adds something else that Torkoal doesn't have. Um, so probably would be better if you diversified the team a little bit there. I don't want to make it seem like I'm shitting on this team, because it is obviously very very strong. You guys just kind of mentioned all of the the good stuff about this team, so just had a few more thoughts there. But yeah, it is a very threatening team. It's not something that I'm looking forward to playing against. It's going to be annoying. It's going to be strong. It's a good team. And moving on to number 1, Dan. Ryan, take it away.
Yeah, for those that don't know, it's my responsibility to talk about Dan's team when it's ranked at number 1. It happens more than I want it to. But anyway, this team is pretty good. I'm not as mad about this one as some other ones. So, in DDF, Zeraora, Volcanion, Gmax Hat, Lipard, Torn T, Bisharp, Como-O, Decidueye, Sanaconda, and Linoon. We all liked this team. So even though I think it's 4 through 2 we were tied, I think we all had Dan's team ranked pretty high, which is why it ended up at 1. There was just not a lot of contention that it was quite good from top to bottom. It's this team's very classic in some of the things it does. I mean, having Indeedee Lipard, great. That's always good. Having Indeedee Hat, that's really good. The I really like the just overall this team from top to bottom can be difficult to prep for just because it can do a lot of different things. That Lipard in particular really makes this team a huge pain to prep for. I really like that the Mons that are also offensive support can also operate in that offensive capacity. So things like that Indeedee, things like Torn T, that typically people slot into a more support, or even Hat sometimes, even though I think Hat's a more offensive Pokemon. But even those Mons that you usually go, okay, these are more my supporting pieces for the team, in DDF can sweep you. Torn T is a really good max airstream sweeper. So like even like the things that are supportive here can really absolutely get a good sweep on you. The speed tiers are pretty polarized in that they tend to be very pretty quick overall, and then or pretty slow. This team does definitely benefit from that Torn Tailwind or the redirection from the Indeedee or Trick Room stuff. It does tend to be a little bit like kind of super speedy. There's not a ton of mons in like that base 90 something range. It's a lot of like base 60 and then well over base 100 mons. You're not going to outspeed anyway. I wrote here a few save or suck mons. What I mean by that is that in draft there are increasingly mons like things like Munchlax, or in this team, the Bisharp and the Como-O, that are mons that I've noticed tend to perform inconsistently, but also tend to auto sweep. So if Dan gets in the right matchup with Bisharp and he gets +2 or whatever, Bisharp can auto sweep. Como is the same way. You can get the Clangorous Soul or the Belly Drum or whatever off, and sometimes it just absolutely goes in. Other times it doesn't. My main concerns with the team, there is a bit of a Snarl and Max Quake weakness. There are a lot of Pokemon here that lean a little bit more special, and then Max Quake is also good into most of the offensive threats. So even some of the physical threats that you do have, like the Zeraora and the Bisharp, are weak to that Max Quake, and then that also is nerfing them the output from a lot of the good special attackers around it. But this team, though, I mean, the Trick Room mode, you don't want to set Trick Room in front of a Hatterene, and you don't want Hatterene to set Trick Room in front of you. And Indeedee Hat is super consistent, did super well last time. I think a lot of the low tier picks are pretty good, even if I think Bisharp and Como are a little bit like do or die Pokemon, basically. I do think things like the Decidueye and the Sandaconda are pretty consistent, and Linoon's kind of a fun, annoying Pokemon. I don't think it does anything that Liepard can't do, but it's fun to be there, I guess. And the Zeraora as a tier one, slightly underwhelming. Zeraora is not the best tier one Pokemon by any stretch of the imagination, but with what was on the draft board and for what Dan's team needed, which was definitely another physical attacker that also offered a little bit extra offensive support, I think Zeraora actually fits that slot really beautifully and really helps it out. So that is Dan's team. Matt, what do you got?
Yeah, I think you covered most of it. I like there's a lot of obvious strong combos here, as well as some variety at Dan's fingertips here. The I think the Lipard having a couple different modes, whether you want Prankster next to like Tornadus or Volcanion is good, or whether you want Unburden with your terrain mode, that seems good. I know Dan is a fan of Zeraora and Volcanion, even though that combination kind of gives you a little bit more of a weakness to the Max Quakes, which seems to be a bit of a trend with some of these teams. Which is kind of interesting. But Hat and Didi, obvious combination. You know exactly what it's gonna do, but it's still very hard to stop. I like as we get down into the mid and low tiers. I like that Dan filled out a lot of the types he wanted with decent Pokemon and value picks. You know sometimes you'll see like a low tier pick, like my Cubone for example, as an attempt to just like get a ground type in one of those low tier slots, even though it's not that great. Um, a lot of these are they're solid Pokemon. They're solid type fillers. They're not anything that makes me go, eh. I mean, I guess you grabbed Sandaconda as a ground type, but it's not that great. Like Sandaconda's, it's decent as a ground type. Decidueye as a ghost and grass type, decent for that. Bisharp, Como, I think the same for those two. So, pretty solid, kind of all the way down. Good value picks, even in the higher tiers. I think that Liepard, Tornadus, Volcanion, Hatterene are all at least decent value. Zeraora, I'm kind of with you, Ryan. It's a little bit underwhelming as a tier one. Would have loved to see Necrozma there, but that's okay. Um,
Hey, I do like that they're better,
I
but
know, I
I
know.
won't deny that Zera isn't the highest value Pokemon.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. That's about it. Definitely. Yeah. The Snarl and Max Quake weakness, I think, is really the main weakness that I saw. The speed tiers. Speed tiers are decent. I like the top end and the bottom end. Zeraora being faster than goddamn Dragapult is amazing. Hatterene at base 29 is also amazing. You just don't have a lot of stuff that fills out a lot of the middle tiers there. Like you got like Indeedee, Volcanion, Bisharp, Como, Decidueye, and Sandaconda. Not well, Decidueye is 60, but so everything aside from that, just kind of in that 70 to 85 range. Um, is not great. I'd like to see a little bit more variety, but at this point, I mean, when we're talking about problems with these top teams, most of the issues we're talking about are maybe a little bit nitpicky, so it might not be that big of a deal. That's about all I got. Dan?
Yeah, I'm just happy with a lot of my low tiers here. I think the Decidueye is actually uh, exactly what this team needs for that sort of max quake weakness as a physical grass type that I was able to get in tier 5. I think I'm very happy with that.
Remind
And
me again, is Decidueye base 60 or 70 speed?
I believe it's base 70.
Okay, so it is in that. Okay, got it.
Yeah, Xanaconda is the one that's a bit lower, but I believe I've got three Pokemon at exactly base 70, which isn't ideal.
I think Sandaconda's a 71 or 72.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right. And then Bisharp is also exactly at 70, and so is Volcanion. But Ryan mentioned the Linoon not knowing what it did outside of Lipard. One thing it can do is this is my another auto sweep option. It's got that belly drum extreme speed that can just
Yeah.
pop off at some point.
Oh
So
wait, I was literally thinking it was the Galar form like an idiot instead of the stupid belly drum one that's really good next to Ndidi. Ignore me. I'm an idiot.
I mean, that's going to
Yes.
be a little bit weird with the psychic terrain since you want to be extreme speeding stuff, but maybe you
Well, I
just.
mean, you belly drum, you max. It's fine. You follow me belly drum max. It works fine. You can't fake
Or
out in DD, so
run it without terrain.
or yeah, which I think is based anyway.
So yeah, there's a lot of options for this team that I think are fun, and I am looking forward to building with it. You guys can just call me Smitty Warbin Jagerman Jensen.
I will
Huh.
not be calling you that.
I don't want to do that. Um, I guess final thoughts for everybody. My final thought for these PRs. I just came off a PR where I looked at most of the teams and went, eh. And it was very refreshing because I actually feel really passionate about a lot of these teams, and I think most of them are very, very, very good. These were pretty hard, and generally I ranked most of these teams pretty highly. So even if you're a little lower, or you think we were a little critical, or I was a little critical on some of these teams, like just know that I really liked what a lot of the coaches went for here. I think these are some really, even the teams that are, a lot of the teams that are lower ranked in some ways, I think are just very inventive. And I'm very excited to kind of see what they go for there. So I'm pretty stoked to watch this season as a spectator and see how this format does in a round two scenario.
Dan, anything?
Uh, nope. I think we covered most of my thoughts in the video. I'm very excited about my team and all the teams really in the league, especially the Bloodbath division, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to diving into it. I've actually, at the time of recording, got my first match tomorrow night, so it's going to be exciting.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, I'm very much. I'd like to second a lot of what you guys said. I love a lot of these teams, even teams that we kind of picked apart a little bit, had some problems with. There's plenty of fun stuff that I'm looking forward to to watching as a spectator and playing against as a player. So it should be a pretty fun season. You guys can look forward to some weekly slash bi-weekly content. Might just be me by myself. Maybe we'll have some other special guests from time to time, but won't be quite the same in-depth analysis that we usually get from a regular MDL season. It'll be more like a highlight reel every 1 to maybe 3 weeks. So that's what you can look forward to content wise. But yeah, that should do it for us. Good luck to everybody in your week 1 matchups, and we will see you guys next time. Peace.